everybody, and welcome. Talking of power thetans, we have a power thetan right here with us, Valerie Ross. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Alex. We have the same last name.
We do. I wonder if we're related. We might be, you know. I do have cousins in America.
Maybe it's my husband's name. So, yeah, you haven't been one of our family reunions, and we have them annually. So you're missing out if you haven't. If we're related.
Something to look into for sure. But I want to introduce you to everyone that's watching. We've got people from all over the world. We've got Scientology up north. That's Denmark. We have Hans Christian Schwartz here. Mark the Dorset SP, who's here in the UK. So there's lots of comments and stuff going along. If you have any questions for Valerie, please put them in the comments. I'll star them as we go through and I can bring them up at the end. But Valerie has been telling her story on Tony Ortega's Underground Bunker and on her own blog, and you have a book as well about how you went undercover to work for the FBI as a Scientology spy under Operation Snow White back in the 70s. And I'm just super intrigued by this story. And I thought, let's bring you on and hear what that was like. So do you want to give us a bit of a backstory of how did Operation Snow White come about? What was the idea? Why did Scientology try and infiltrate the US government?
You know, I can't give you the background on how that came about because I came in shortly before the FBI got raided, like months before it got raided. Hubbard had already planned it years earlier, and people were infiltrating government offices years before I came on board. Hubbard made the plan. I know the basics of the plan, and that is that, you know, as always, Hubbard believed that everyone was out to get Scientology. And it was our job as his loyal army to get people to stop trying to take down Scientology and him. We were his army that needed to attack the people that were taking him down. And oddly enough, we all bought into it. Those of us in the Guardian's office and those of us who were volunteers for the Guardian's office. I actually ended up being in the Guardian's office through a series of unfortunate events. I don't know if you want to go that deep into the weeds in my story.
Sure. I think it's absolutely interesting, your story through and through, and we will get there. I think my idea is that we'll do a couple of episodes to this story because there's so much to tell. I want to start off with the FBI thing because it's so fascinating, and I think that people are really interested in that. And then I think in part 2 we can go into the aftermath and a little bit of your story beforehand. But in a nutshell, you joined Scientology in, what was it, 1975, and by 1977 you were working for the FBI, right? So it's quite a short window of time between you joining and then becoming a Sea Org spy.
Oh, well, actually, I was a GO spy.
Right.
There is a difference because as far as the Sea Org was concerned, by the time I was a GO spy, I was a disgraced Sea Org member, and I had got a Scientology SP declare issued on me, and I was not a good person, and I was no longer a Scientologist in good standing, although I was working directly with L. Ron Hubbard's wife, Mary Sue, and his daughter, Diana. But the people in Sea Org thought I had an SP declare and was not a good Scientologist.
Wow. Gosh, I didn't know that part of your story. And so the Guardian's office is what preceded what we now know as OSA, the Office of Special Affairs. And essentially, the Guardian's office was this spy wing, dirty tricks department, the defenders of Scientology. And that all got shut down in the wake of Operation Snow White. Is that right?
That is correct. What happened is after Mary Sue Hubbard, Ron's wife, got indicted, she took the fall for him. He threw her under the bus. And after that happened, when she got out of prison, she served just over a year of her 4-year term. But when she got out of prison, Miscavige came in and basically kicked her out. I mean, she fought tooth and nail, but he came in and and dismantled the Guardian's office under the guise of they were the bad guys. They had done all this horrible stuff. They could do no right. And they were then going to create something much nicer than, which is the Office of Special Affairs. Honestly, it's worse. it uses, the beginning policies in the OSA Network Operators Pack are exactly the same policies I studied when I went into the Guardian's office. The exact policies. The difference now is that they have added policies about how to make lawsuits horrendous, stuff that is worse. They've made OSA even meaner, more horrific, and a worse spy thing, because OSA doesn't have enough manpower in itself these days to do all the spying, and so they hire people, which makes it even meaner and more horrible, because they put a lot of money behind it, where the Guardian's office is more ragtag, I guess you could say, because they use their own people.
Yeah.
So we were less polished.
Right. But you still managed to get away with it. This is what shocked me about your story, because Operation Snow White was and it still is, the largest infiltration of the US government in its history. Estimates are around 5,000 spies Scientology sent in to various government agencies to try and steal files, get information about Scientology, and also plant certain documents. And 5,000 people didn't go to prison. Mary Sue obviously served time, as you just explained, but a lot of people, and you're one of them, managed to go in and come out without the FBI having any idea whatsoever.
I couldn't name I could maybe name 50 of the people of those 5,000. So that's how compartmentalized this whole thing was. So 5,000 people didn't go to prison, and most of us didn't know who the rest of them were. It was very, very. Let me just tell you one thing. It wasn't, although the press called it Operation Snow White, it was the Snow White Project. That's what Hubbard had it.
Right. Interesting. Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, right. So, but the press called it Operation Snow White. That's what it's publicly known as. And if you were to look it up on Wikipedia, it's Operation Snow White. But it was the Snow White Project.
Okay.
Just semantics, but
no, it's important, and these things can kind of get lost in history when reporters take them and run with them, and journalists. The same thing is with the pack base in LA, right? Everyone calls it Big Blue, but in Scientology, no one refers to it as Big Blue. It's known as the pack base, right? But that's how people identify it. So can you tell us about how you got sucked into the Snow White Project? Because you were pregnant and you essentially ended up working for the FBI, but how did that happen in the first place?
It was really happenstance. What happened is, I had gone clear, and I don't know how many of your listeners know this stuff.
They're familiar with like the basic terms and stuff, and I'll interject and explain if it's a little advanced or whatever that they may struggle with. But
Valerie Ross, go there.
Oh, I think we're having some audio issues. There's lots of clicking back and forth going on. I don't know if it's your AirPods. Yeah, you're cutting in and out. Do you want to try maybe take your AirPods out and putting them back in again or something? Just in case it's them. And then I think you might need to reconnect them. Please bear with us while we have these technical difficulties. You might need to reconnect your AirPods on StreamYard. Meanwhile, I'm going to say hello to some people in the chat. So hello, we've got Sweet Liberty here. Hi, hello, everyone. Sam says, didn't know the FBI went undercover into it. So this isn't the FBI going into undercover into Scientology. This is Scientology going undercover into the FBI, which we will hear more about from Valerie shortly. A. Jansen is here. Good evening. Thank you for joining. How are we getting on, Val? Can you hear me okay or no? We can't hear you at all. You might need to go into, you see on StreamYard at the bottom, there's a cog that says settings. If you click on that and then go to audio.
Yeah.
And then,
There.
yay, perfect. You're back. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
I
I don't know
you.
what
Is that
happened
better?
there. Yes.
Okay.
I think that we just lost connection. I was just saying
Okay.
hello to everybody in the chat and explaining. So carry on. Sorry. So how did you get sucked into the Snow White project?
Okay. So I was working for the GO and I had gone clear. And what I was just saying when I started talking is that on my website, ValerieRossBooks.com, I've made this really extensive glossary. So if you want to go there and look up these words while I'm saying, there's a whole lot of them and it's searchable. So anyway,
Yes.
so I had gone clear and I was on my way to OT3. And when after you go clear, there's this thing called a no interference zone. So between clear and OT3, you're not supposed to get any kind of auditing except the stuff that you're working on to go to OT3. So I had done that, and and Mary Sue called me in and she said, Ron has some special auditing he wants you to get. I'm like, okay, well, it's Hubbard. He knows what he's talking about. I'll do it. So I started this auditing, and it was really, really bad, and it made me feel horrendous. And I went to Mary Sue and I said, whatever this is, I hate it. And I actually had said that to the auditor before then, and the auditor looked at the e-meter and said, your needle's floating. So the auditor understood that I did not like what was happening to me.
Right.
So then when I went to Mary Sue and said that, she said, okay, we won't do that anymore. And I had told Diana I didn't like it. Diana was my immediate boss, actually. Mary Sue is Hubbard's wife. Diana is Hubbard's daughter. So anyway, I told these people that, and they had put me on this special project where I was helping Heber Jench and Yvonne Jench over at Celebrity Center. And I came home from doing that, and I was typing up my report, and I typed about 100 words a minute then. And I was, and Diana walked by and she says, oh, you type. I'm like, yeah. And she said, meet me out in front of the manor tomorrow. I'm like, oh, okay. So the next morning I met her out in front of the manor, and there was a van with blacked out windows. And I'm like, I think I need to go home, because I'm at the point that time I was like, I don't even remember how pregnant I was. But I was pregnant, definitely pregnant. And here they are going to throw me in a van with blacked out windows. And she says, I need to blindfold you before I put you in the van. And I'm like, no. And as she's blindfolding me, she whispers in my ear, this is going to be okay. Sure, whatever you say. And I got in the van and sitting in the front seat with the driver, who was really quite pleasant and just chit-chatted with me for about 2.5, 3 hour drive. I didn't have a watch, couldn't tell you the time for sure, but it seemed like 2.5 to 3 hours. And we get out at this hacienda looking place in the middle of the desert. And I've since then confirmed with Mike Rinder and Matt Pesh that was La Quinta by the description I gave them. And Matt Pesh was actually at La Quinta when I was there. And Mike Rinder has confirmed that Hubbard was there when I went there. Right. So this is not like, oh my gosh, this was my imagination, because I had
Sure.
really bad auditing or something.
And
You know.
La Quinta
So
is the secret kind of hideout that Hubbard was living in during this period of time where he didn't want anyone to know where he was, where his whereabouts were. So this is a secret base that you weren't meant to know where it was, hence the blindfold, right?
right. As a matter of fact, he actually fled there shortly after the FBI raid. I'm getting ahead of myself because some of his staff members where it was.
Right.
How that's how um, that's because it was this.
Oh, we're getting that audio interference again. I wonder if maybe they're running out of battery. Oh, can you still hear me now? Okay, we can't hear you now. If you go into the settings on StreamYard, you might need to change your microphone so that it's not your AirPods and use your built-in microphone. We can't hear you. People in the chat are saying must be OSA trolls getting involved.
Yes, that's it.
Oh, that's much better. Here we go. Okay, let's carry on. So you're at La Quinta, L. Ron Hubbard's hideout that he ended up going to afterwards to hide anyway, but this was before the raid, right?
Correct. So
Sure.
this is before the raid. He's hiding out at La Quinta because he's Hubbard and he lets everybody do work. I didn't say that. Well, yes, I did. No. So anyway, so he's at La Quinta and but I didn't know where I was or why I was there. I was just escorted into a room and I sat down and I'm like, what's going on here? And then I hear this booming laugh in the corridor and the door opens and I recognize the laugh because I'd listened to tapes on the briefing course when I was supervising the briefing course. So I'm like, oh, that's Hubbard. And so he walks in with a messenger with her clipboard and they stand there. He stands there a minute and he introduces himself and then he sits down and I'm like, okay. And he says, I understand you've been having a rough time. And he looked really concerned and very worried and just sad that I had this rough time. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And he says, I apologize. I shouldn't have done that to you. That was not good. That's not going to be happening anymore. And to reward you, I'm going to let you spy on the FBI for me.
Wow.
Okay. So
what went through your mind in that moment? Like, what were you thinking?
I kind of was just sitting. I don't know. I mean, I was blank. I was like, spy on the FBI? That's a reward. I was scared. I was like, how am I going to do that? What is this about? Blah, blah, blah. And then he just said, okay, well, let's go. And I stand up and he stands up and I was kind of surprised, honestly, because I was 5'10.5". I've lost a couple of inches since then, and I was in heels because they had told me to dress up nicely. And so he was taller than me. And that surprised me. I, for some reason, had thought he was a shorter man. He was a big man.
Right.
But
complete opposite of David Miscavige.
Right. He was tall, though. He was, besides being larger in girth, he was tall.
Sure.
So it kind of surprised me for him. And he was at least 6 foot, if not taller. So,
right.
Yeah, anyway. So I was kind of surprised that he was that tall. And I was like, he shook my hand. And I'm like, okay. And I was just kind of scared. And then I just stood there and they walked out. And then I stood there and somebody escorted me back out after. And then they blindfolded me, put me back in the van, and we drove back. And Diana met me there and took me downstairs in the basement of the manor. It was before it was Celebrity Center. They hadn't remodeled it then. They didn't actually get it all the way moved in until 1990, and I was long gone by then. But so then I was told that the FBI needed typists. They needed clerk typists, and they needed to be trained on the Mag Card 2. And the Mag Card 2 was actually pretty high tech back then. It's like a Selectric typewriter, only it had kind of an attached computer thing that was attached to it, that you fed a magnetic card into the machine, and it would record what you had typed, and it held up to 2.5 pages on that magnetic card. So it was an early version of a word processor, basically.
Right. Yeah.
So you could type everything up, you'd record it under the mag card. The person would look at what you typed, you'd feed the mag card back in, make the corrections line by line on what you'd fed into the mag card, and then give them their stuff. So that was the easier way of correcting something without having to retype it. So they needed that kind of typist. And you had to be trained on the mag card, which not many people in the world were trained on the mag card back then at that time. But because the FBI needed it, and because only the high dollar offices had those things back then, they paid for my training. And I had gone from $5 a week to $50 a week when I went from Sea Org to Guardian's office anyway. So I was like living high in the hog.
Right. Completely different to what it's like nowadays, where all Sea Org staff and, OSA staff get £50 a week and that's it.
Yeah. Well, so I had actually made a giant jump in pay when I went to OSA, and then I went to train for Kelly's services, and I was making $3.40 an hour.
Right.
Which in the 70s was like really pretty decent pay.
Yeah, that's probably like a decent wage nowadays if you adjust it for inflation.
Correct. Right. And then once I finished, just really quick aside, after I had like 4 days between when I went from Kelly's services into the FBI, they had me handing out cigarettes on the street corner in LA.
Wait, who? Scientology or the FBI?
Yeah, no, Kelly services. They just said, you want a job while you're waiting? And I'm like, sure. And so they paid me to hand out cigarettes on the street corner in LA.
So bizarre.
Are they
never
good?
seen that nowadays.
I don't smoke. I don't know.
How funny.
Yeah.
So what was your assignment when they said you need to go and become a typist for the FBI? They need these specific typists. Did they tell you then you're doing this job because we need you to do this for us? Or was it just get a job in the FBI and then the mission or the assignment came later?
I was told that I would need to pull pieces of paper from files.
Right.
That was going to be my job, but I didn't know what pieces of paper at the time. And then once I trained, I was given a list. I don't know where they got the information. I was just given a list of documents I needed to get. Mm. So, and I was also told, keep your ears out. Any mention of Scientology, let us know. Mm. I didn't hear the word Scientology the entire time I was at the FBI.
Wow. Was there any sort of like background clearance or security protocols you had to do when you joined the FBI? Like, did they look into your background and all of this before giving you the job? Because it sounds like it was a lot more relaxed back then to what it would be nowadays.
I did have a background check. I had my fingerprints taken, and hey, I can pass an FBI background check today. I did actually. I actually took a course about 10 years ago on fingerprinting, and I can fingerprint other people, and and yet you're getting an FBI lanyard and the whole thing. So I pass an FBI background check now these days. So yeah, I mean, they had to do an FBI background check on me, but I mean, I was pretty shiny clean, honestly. It's like I was 21 years. Oh no, I was 22 years old by then. Right. And I grew up in a village in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, it was like, I didn't have anything on my record. So yeah, it was like, okay, well, yeah, I don't think she's ever even, yeah. So there was nothing on my record. So yeah, I passed an FBI background check, but it was like pretty simple.
I think that's one thing that stands out from your story as well, is what a different world we live in nowadays in terms of the back. Like, I can imagine nowadays the FBI would ask much more stringent questions and do a lot more background digging before giving you any sort of job that gets you anywhere near any sort of confidential files. But back then, I mean, this is a quote from one of your blog posts on Tony Ortega's blog. You said that so you're talking about your bag and how you snuck documents out in your bag, and you said that you got teased about it. It was like a big old black hole, but no one would have considered looking in it. I rummaged through it on a regular enough basis that it was the perfect way to hide in plain sight. No one looked twice if I put something in or took something out of my bag. I mean, I can't imagine that ever happening in 2024, but back in the 70s, I guess things were different.
I have worked in offices where a bag wouldn't make it past the security desk.
Sure.
These days, I mean, you know, and that's not the FBI. Most places I have worked, or even like when I went to the courthouse before I retired, you would not. You leave your bag. You can't even go into the courthouse with your bag, much less walk into the FBI.
Yeah,
you would have to locker it or something before you even walked in the doors.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, you would have to have it somewhere outside of the premises. These days.
And you have to wonder if things like this infiltration of the FBI and other government agencies are part of the reason that those checks are now in place, because they completely got swindled. They didn't realize they had been infiltrated until much later on, until they raided Scientology, right?
I think that's, yeah. I mean, even after I came back, they didn't, I came back after the raid and they still didn't suspect me.
Gosh. So talk to me about starting at the FBI. You walk in, it's your first day, and you've got in the back of your head, I'm here to steal documents, basically, for the greater good, because that's what Scientology have told me, L. Ron Hubbard has told me to do. What was it like? You must have been, I would have been a nervous wreck.
Yeah, but I was a Scientologist.
There we go.
I was terrified. I was like, how am I going to pull this off? I had my macrame bag. This was the 70s. You know, you have these giant old macrame bags. And I was like, okay, this is, you know, nobody told me how to do it. This, you know, the supreme test of a Thetanist is the ability to make things go.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
So I had to figure out how I was going to do this myself. I didn't even bring the list. I had to memorize the list.
This is the list of things that you had to find, right?
Correct. I certainly would not have brought that list in. And had I been caught taking anything, that was on me. They would have disavowed any knowledge of me being in there. I was not. I was a Scientologist in bad standing. I was not even a Scientologist in the eyes of Scientology. Therefore, had I been caught, it was all on me. And I knew that when I went in.
Did you see this mission as sort of part of your amends? Because in Scientology, for those of you watching, if you're not in good standing, you've been declared an SP or whatever, you're in some ethics trouble, one of the things you have to do is make amends. You have to make up for the damage that you've caused by being a bad Scientologist. So did you, even if it wasn't officially an amends project, did you view this as kind of a way of getting back into good graces with the church by doing them a favor almost?
No. I didn't know I was an SP until 2012.
Right. Okay. Wow.
I was not told I had an SP declare.
Okay.
Mark Plummer told me I had an SP declare in 2012.
Wow.
And told me what it said.
And do you think that was preemptive because they knew that they would be able to cast you aside if you got caught
Yes.
doing this stuff, right?
Oh yes, I think they did that on purpose, but I was not told that happened. I just was kind of like, oh, okay, that's just kind of that. What they did is just kind of part of the game they played, and that now my students think that they think I just disappeared, and I did not know what my students at the briefing course were told. I did not know any of that until 2012.
Wow.
Yeah, so I really did not have any clue I was in that bad of standing.
Sure.
So for me, it was just kind of like, oh, I'm helping Ron. Oh boy, look at me.
Yeah. Because you were still under the illusion, right? And this is the thing, when you're in Scientology, you believe that Scientology is the way, the best, not just the best, but the only way of helping humanity. So if L. Ron Hubbard asks you to do something, you're gonna do it because you trust his judgment and you think that he knows best.
Yes, and I was personally told by him that he had given me this privilege.
Gosh.
Oh my gosh.
And so what sort of things were on the list that you had to collect? What sort of documents?
All I had was document dates and a sort of description of what was in them, like from, to, and I didn't read the documents. I was a good Scientologist. I was given a date and a description of from, to, and maybe a regarding. So I actually can't. I've actually gone through, and I can go, oh, I pulled that document. You know, I went through the list of court documents. I spent time slogging through that one day. I went, oh, well, that was one of mine. Oh, that was one of mine.
Wow.
Yeah, but for me, it was just a list of, oh, well, for some reason they think this is important. The large majority of the documents, okay, see, what I went, okay, I walk in the door. I'm scared. I walk up to the front desk, introduce myself. The girl looks at the list. Oh, yes, okay. Do you want coffee, water? I'm like, oh, water, I'm fine. You know, she gives me a glass of water. This one, we're not in bottled water territory in the 70s. And she takes me into this conference room the FBI conference room, where I'm seated and three men come in shirt sleeves, no ties, nothing like that. And they talk to me, and they're my guys for the duration of the time I was there. And they ask, well, do you do dictation? Do you take dictation? I'm like, do you know how to use a dictaphone? Yeah, I've used one. But then I said, I'm better at shorthand. They all look at each other because nobody did shorthand by then, you know. And so I did. So they were able to, they take me in their office, they dictate to me in shorthand, or they put stuff from the dictaphone on my desk, and I would do the tapes. I got really good at dictaphone there. And I put it on, I do what they did, put it on a mag card, save that, label it, and then they take the document into their office. When it was final, I would go pull the documents that they needed for that, because there were always attachments. And 80% of the time, they were in the confidential document room. And the confidential document room was locked. And it was easier for them to just give me the keys and go get them than for them to go get them. And I know.
This is another thing about your story. In fact, I wrote here, this is another quote from one of your articles. I was told where certain files were that I was supposed to locate, and that there was and that I was to copy them, return the original files to the drawers, and bring the other files home with me. I don't know how they knew what to ask for, but I do know there were secrets in every room. It was not uncommon for me to have to dig through the filing cabinets while I was working there. I had full access to the common files in the central area, and all I had to do to get the more confidential files was ask one of my guys to unlock the door. Like, nowadays, that would never happen. Like,
No.
Yeah,
somebody would either follow me in, or they would go get the document. I would not. Yeah, no, I was taken in. I was locked in there. It was like, or sometimes they just tossed me the keys. It's like,
Gosh.
okay. So I go in, I'd lock myself in, and then I had, I was always scared because they could always, somebody could come in at any point and while I was in there digging. So I dug fast, but I could get whatever. And I'd always put the documents that Scientology wanted in with the other documents. So their documents were on top and like all the way through it. So, oh, whoops, I pulled some wrong documents if they caught me with the documents. And then I go back out, make sure the door was closed, locked, blah, 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 after I left. And then I go to the copy machine, make copies of everything. And then I would sort. I had, I don't know if you know what a carrel is. It's kind of like, it's more of there's a stand and it has sides on it. And then I had my hands down below the carrel sorting the documents. Right. So you couldn't really see what I was sorting if you were standing right at my desk talking to me. So I'd be talking to them like this, blah, 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 blah. So they would get, I could sort confidential documents of theirs and documents Scientology wanted to steal into different piles, and I'd be stapling things and stuff like that. And then I'd go, okay, I need to go back in the room, and I'd grab an armful of stuff, and they'd either let me back in or hand me the keys, and I go back in the room and refile everything, the originals. But in the meantime, I go, oh, I'll grab a banana. So, yeah. Well, I dropped a handful of papers, but I kind of have the armful of papers in and kind of slide some out while I, stuff like that. Got really good at sleight of hand. So anyway, so
and you just ended up putting these files in your bag and walking out of the building with them.
Yes.
No one batted an eyelid or checked your bag or anything.
No.
Wow. Gosh.
No, and I can't imagine leaving a building if you did have a bag. I mean, my husband was talking about this. He worked at Bridger Cole for 38 years. And even when they left Bridger Cole, they had to have their lunch boxes checked before they could drive off the property.
Sure.
At Bridger Cole.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Gosh. And so there must have been, I was thinking about this actually, there must have been a lot of intelligence work on Scientology's part before you got that job, because for them to know the specific files they needed and the locations that they would be in to then direct you to go and get them, they must have had other spies or agents working in the department to figure out how to tell you where to look, surely.
Yes, I don't know who, but I know I wasn't the only one there because I had very, very specific documents. It wasn't like, see if you can figure out anything that says, I didn't have to read documents. I didn't know, it's kind of like, this document is here. This document is here. This document is this date. I had very little searching I had to do.
Right. And what happened once you got the document, you've taken it out of the FBI office? Like, did you have a secret meeting place with Mary Sue or with someone from the Guardian's office where you'd hand the documents over?
Basement of the manor.
Right. So you would do that every day after work or once a week? Or
I actually, the first day I went home first and then went across the street. And after that, I because of the way my home life was, it was easier to go across the street, drop off the documents before I went home because I didn't know when I'd make it across the street after I got home.
Sure.
So, so I generally just stop off at the manor on the way home, just plump, and walk out, and then later on I'd write up my mission report for the day, because you had to write up your report every single day, my daily report. But I always would drop off the documents the minute I got back from work.
Gosh.
Hey, I was making $4.30 an hour by the time I got to the FBI.
Wow.
Yeah. Plus my $50 a week FBI GO pay.
So they continued paying you your Guardian's office, your SEAL pay, while you were working at the FBI, they didn't stop those payments and
No.
at all. You carried on.
And feeding me.
Right.
Well, I didn't make it to many of the meals in the galley, but if I went to the galley, I got free food, and they paid for my birthing at on 1811 Tamarind until after my child was born.
Right. And what was your, did you have a statistic? Because for those of you watching, in Scientology, as I'm sure everyone is aware, as a staff member, everyone has a statistic, and your stats always have to be up every single week. So I was director of public book sales, so my stats were number of books sold and number of people introduced and this sort of thing. And so it's very easy to quantify how good or not I am at my job because it's a raw number. Did you have a statistic whilst in the GO of like number of documents stolen or something?
No,
Okay.
we didn't even have an org board.
Right.
We didn't have a visible org board. I'm sure Mary Sue knew who everybody was, but I didn't know who anybody was. We didn't know. I think in OSA there are statistics, and I think that there are org boards, but in the GO it was much. It was much less. It was a whole lot more relaxed. Mary Sue was a lot less regimented than Ron. She wasn't really all that naval.
Sure. And you 100%. I mean, they must have had no idea, because when the raid happened and when it all got found out that this operation was going on, you know, certain people were arrested and, you know, punished and all of this. But you carried on working for the FBI for a few months after the raid had happened. Was that purely just to, you know, avoid suspicion?
Yes, I actually, the day of the raid, the evening of the raid, after my husband went on course, so he wouldn't suspect I was worried. Well, the day of the raid, I actually had a doctor's appointment, so I didn't go to work that day. And so I actually saw the raid go down at the manor. And then it was weird because my husband's brother happened to be at Big Blue. He was there. We'll talk about that. It's a long thing about how Big Blue was getting renovated and everything. But he happened to be at Big Blue from Bellevue as a staff member that Hubbard had ordered in and stuff. But so he saw it at the manor. I mean, at Big Blue, we saw it at the manor as it was going down. And Karen De La Care, by the way, was in the manor on a mission. So she saw it inside. Wow. Yeah. So anyway, but that day I wasn't there. But then the next Monday I went back because I walked across the street after my husband went on course because I couldn't tell him, you know, I'm probably going to end up going to jail tomorrow or today even, you know. Yeah. So I walked across the street and I said to Mary Sue, so what do I do now? And she said, act like nothing happened. So I said, okay. So the next day, well, you know, I had Saturday, it was a Friday when the rain went down. So I had Saturday and Sunday to freak out. And I did. I was so scared. Oh my gosh. And I actually wrote a letter confessing everything. And I put it in my bag. And I had it addressed to my parents. And I was pretty sure that when I walked into the FBI that day, I would not come out a free woman. So it's like, okay, my child's going to be born in prison, and I walked into the FBI ready to go out in handcuffs, and nothing happened.
Wow.
They treated me exactly the same as they had the day before. And it was actually pretty nice because then I didn't have to seal any documents and didn't have to lie. And I got, for like a few months there, from July until the end of October, I actually just got to work. and just be relaxed and type and do my job. I was treated so well there. I really was. It was the only place I ever got a baby shower. And I actually was telling Mike Rinder that, and I said, I didn't even know what a baby shower was. And he said,
Yeah.
I didn't either. He said, Christy had said something about having a baby shower, and he's like, what? You're not even have the baby yet. What? How you want to take it in the shower? He didn't know what it was. It's like,
Sure.
yeah, we don't. They don't. It's not a thing, But they gave me at the FBI a baby shower, a going away party, and a baby shower when I left.
Wow.
It was, wow.
Yeah. And it's almost like the perfect disguise as well, because you're about to give birth to your child and the raid has happened. You've done the spying. It's almost the perfect excuse for you to leave your job at the FBI without suspicion, because no one's going to bat an eyelid if you go on maternity leave and then decide, oh, I'm just going to raise my kid, I'm not going to work anymore. So actually, it was quite a fortunate timing in terms of a disguise for you.
I was a temporary employee anyway. I wasn't a full-time employee. So it was just like my temporary employment ended, period, the end. It was perfect. It was, yeah.
Gosh. And so during this period, obviously, what we're talking about here, infiltrating the FBI and spying on the US government for Scientology, obviously this isn't something that's legal, right? People went to prison for what was going through your mind when you were doing it? Like, how did you justify it at the time?
There were times when I went, what am I doing? I actually, especially at the beginning, there were 3 or 4 days when I would go, I'd start to pull a piece of paper out and I'd start to put it back and I go, these guys are good guys. Well, I could just stay here. I could do this. I'm making good money. This is, I don't have to do this. And then I go, but I'm saving the world.
Yeah.
This is, look what I'm doing. I'm doing this for Hubbard. I'm doing this to save the planet. If I don't do this, the planet is going to be destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly the reason I asked you that question, was because I think a lot of people that watch these videos that us ex-Scientologists are doing on YouTube and kind of getting involved in the activism, it's really hard to get across the mindset of a Scientologist. Like, you fully believe that you are helping humanity, so you will go to great lengths to do your mission. And if LRH has told you to go and steal some files, you're probably thinking, yeah, this might not be legal. However, I'm doing it for the greater good. I'm actually by doing this small thing that's illegal, it will be helping the human race, the planet, right? And that's why I asked that question, is because I want to get that across to people that you did this because you thought you were helping.
Yes, I really, really believed I was helping somebody. Yeah, I believed I was helping the entire human race when I was doing that. That's the only way I could get past it in my mind. I'm doing this horrific thing. I'm stealing from the government. But yeah.
Gosh. Yeah. And so when you, I think this is kind of where we'll start to wrap it up before we jump into questions, because I know we're approaching an hour. When you saw people like Mary Sue going to prison, the court case, and all of these files coming out, were you worried at that point that things were going to catch up and they were going to, catch you as well in the aftermath, even though you weren't working there anymore?
I really wasn't seeing it. In Scientology, you get a lot of stuff hidden from you. I left LA before a whole lot of it went down, because if you read later on in my story, I ended up hospitalized because I almost got killed by my ex. And so they had gotten rid of me because I was considered a liability to the Guardian's office. I was considered a liability to the Guardian's office because I kept upsetting my ex-husband by causing him to do it.
Outrageous. It's outrageous.
So by then we had actually left that circle. And you didn't, if you were in Bellevue or Salt Lake, which is the places I was, you did not hear about what was happening with the Guardian's office. I didn't know Mary Sue went to jail until I was out of Scientology.
Right.
So, no, I wasn't scared then. I actually, once I started working at the law firm and after I got out of Scientology, I went to the FBI personally and told them about my role in it because.
Did you? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Because I was like, you know what? I'm working in a law firm now, and this does not feel right to me. I walk by this FBI building every day, and I'm going to go walk in and tell them. And they were like, okay, thanks. You know?
So you went into the FBI and told them I was a part of this, I did this, and it was wrong. And they just said, thank you, see you later. They didn't care.
Right. I was a teeny player. I was a minor cog. And they had actually gotten the big shots, you know, they'd already, it was kind of over by then. And they really, I was just kind of, it was like, okay, I appreciate you telling us that and taking your whatever, you know, they just were like, yeah. But I know they probably have my statement somewhere on file, but it's like,
Wow. And that's what I think. I mean, there's lots of things that shock me about this story, but like, I would have thought that the FBI, if I'm working for the FBI and someone comes into my office and says, hey, I was a part of this thing, I stole documents, and this was perhaps a bigger operation than you thought it was historically, I would have thought the FBI would be all over it. But no, because the trial had been finished and they'd convicted certain people, they just had no interest in following it up. I suppose because they knew that it had finished by then. Because there wouldn't be people still working for the FBI, right?
Right. I think it would be like, yeah, it's over. It's why, you know, I mean, we're talking, it was 7 or 8 years after the fact, and they just were over it. I mean, it was a whole lot of work for them to just get it going and getting, you know, I think they just went, yeah, we got what we needed. We punished some people, and and also the GO would be shut down by then. So they thought they had cut off the snake at the head.
Sure.
They didn't understand that the snake still exists.
And I think that's one of the things when we talk about the estimate being 5,000 agents that were working in government departments, but as spies for Scientology, the number of people convicted, I think, was only 11 or 20 or something.
11.
It was 11, right? So they didn't, but I think they understand that it must have been a much bigger operation. And so the 5,000 number is an estimate, but it was so compartmentalized. Like you were saying, you didn't even know anyone else in the office. You knew there must have been someone in your office.
Right.
You only knew the information that you were given to do your job, right?
And no one named Hubbard.
Right.
I personally talked to Hubbard. I wouldn't have named Hubbard. If I didn't name him in the letter.
Sure. No
one named Hubbard. He was the head.
And ultimately, Hubbard threw his wife under the bus, didn't he?
He did. She jumped under the bus.
Because that's how committed everybody was at the time.
Yes. Yeah. She voluntarily jumped under the bus, but he willingly threw her under the bus too. I mean, it was kind of, yeah. She would have jumped under the bus if he hadn't thrown her, but he threw her under the bus. He went in hiding and never spoke to her again. It's just very sad.
Gosh. Wow. Well, Valerie, I think we've only just scratched the surface with
Yeah.
your story. And I think we definitely want to do a part 2 where we get into the aftermath and more of your story. But let's look at some of these questions I've been starring as we go through. Oh no, Nora here. She's saying this is an important and revealing chat. Thank you, Nora. And I'm going to bring your question up first because it's kind of personal to what we were just talking about. Did you know my father, Constantine Sover, and my mum, Kathy Nather?
I knew Kathy. I didn't know Constantine.
Do you want to explain a little bit more about Kathy and your relationship to her?
The name is popping up in my mind, and I'm trying to recall even when I knew her. I think she might have lived in Cameroon when I did, and that's how I knew her. But I can't even tell you for sure when I knew her.
Okay.
It's been a few years.
It's been a minute. Yeah. All right. Well, maybe I'll have to introduce you to Nora so that she can give you some information or something, and maybe see
That
if you.
would be great. Yeah, I
Okay.
would like that.
Awesome. Care for JCYT said, did you understand it was illegal? I think we kind of covered that. You did, but you thought you were helping.
Yeah, but Hubbard actually had policy on the fact that you could do things illegal. I mean, okay, it was Hubbard policy that you could do anything illegal you wanted as long as it was better for the world, the Scientology. Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely. Whitney here is saying hello, Alex and Valerie. Hi all. Hello to Whitney. Tim Greenglass says, I don't doubt it, but it's mind-blowing. 5,000 spies means there were 50 case handlers with 100 spies each in theory. The scale of this thing is mind-blowing, right? That it's the largest infiltration of the US government in its history was Scientology. This operation must have been massive.
Well, let's put this in perspective. Mike Rinder, until I told him, had no clue Diana was in it. Mike Rinder had been told that Diana was leaving the Sea Org to go be with her husband. Yet Diana was my personal handler.
Right.
So
it was that compartmentalized.
Yes.
Yeah. And I suppose that's an age-old intelligence tactic, isn't it? You know, if you look at how even the CIA and FBI operate today, like the less you know, the better, because that protects the whole operation. And that's exactly how Scientology were operating and continue to operate today, is only the people that need to do the job know about the job that they're doing.
Right.
Sure. Alrighty. Nermin Odkin is saying, question, what was in the confidential documents? Was it Hubbard's true naval records? Because you said at the time you didn't know what was in them, but you managed to look back at some of them in the trial, right? What were the documents?
You know, it's been about 10 years since I looked at them. I would have to actually reread them to tell you. I didn't care enough to read them that far. It was kind of like, wow, why do they even care? Yeah. I think it was just anything that had the word Scientology in there. They wanted it out of their files. It was really nothing to do with much of anything. They just didn't want the government to have anything that had the word Scientology in it because they thought that was damning to them.
Mm. And did you ever have to plant documents? Because another part of the Snow White Project was planting documents in government files so that Scientology could make a claim that it was an operation against them or something. Did you ever do any of that, or was it just taking files away?
Just taking. I just took.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I did one time burn documents with Hubbard.
Really?
Yeah.
You've got to tell that story.
Yeah, but it was actually when I was told that I was a liability to the GO, and they took all of my confidential files, and we sat on my patio and burned them in a hibachi.
Wow.
Because, you know, we don't spoil evidence in Scientology. Not at all.
That's incredible. And it just goes to show the lengths that Scientology will go to conceal the truth and doctor files and, you know, destroy files if necessary, destroy evidence.
There was a lot of burning of files when I was in there.
Yeah.
A lot.
Wow. Mrs. J here asks, how long had you been in Scientology before LRH asked you to work in the FBI?
Little under 2 years.
That's not a very long time.
No.
When you think about it.
No, I was in Scientology less than 6 months before I joined the Sea Org. So yeah, I kind of would drink really fast.
Wow. And that's something that hasn't changed. Like even today, you
Yeah.
know, the time between me starting my first Scientology course and joining staff was like 6 months. You know, and they do very quickly recruit you if they can.
Right. They find the gung-ho ones and they get them where they can really fast.
Yeah. Whitney here is saying, oh, wow. So nobody inside knew they were even imprisoned. So
Oh,
yeah,
no.
you had no idea.
No. We thought we were doing the good work and everybody out there were the ones in prison.
Wow. So when did you found out when you left Scientology, when you started looking back, that's when you found out people went to prison?
I didn't find out Mary Sue went to prison until I'm trying to remember when I actually found out Mary Sue went to prison. Because see, what I did is I didn't tell people I had been in Scientology when I left Scientology. So it took me until 2011 before I even admitted I had been in Scientology. I left in 1984. So I don't think I found out, I think it was 2013 before I even found out Mary Sue had been in prison. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't something we were told. It was, no, we didn't know anybody who got in trouble for Snow White. I knew things were coming down. I knew that they were going to court when I left for Bellevue. That was as far as I ever got until after.
Gosh, it takes a long time to recover, doesn't it, and heal. Yeah. Witness here is also saying, I love Valerie, so brave. Wow. I think brave is such a key word here because firstly, you were brave to go into the FBI, get a job and do what Scientology were asking you to do. And then secondly, I think you were even more brave to carry on working for the FBI after the infiltration had finished to try and not get caught. And then you were brave to leave Scientology. And then you're brave again, speaking out and sharing your story and coming on here and telling the world about, you know, your role in the Snow White project. Like you are a brave person, Valerie.
Thank you. I was going to say to Witness, there's if you're new to my story, on my ValerieRossBooks.com, there I have a whole thing that says if you're new to my story, and it has everything I've posted just in case you want to read any of the other stuff. It's so you can get the backstory and the afterwards, just so you know.
I want to bring this up actually. This is your website. There is a link in the description down below the video.
That's my glossary right there.
So yeah, if there's ever any words that you come across and you don't know what they mean, like Scientology terms, Valerie has created this interactive glossary of Scientology terms, and you can search whatever the term is. So let's, I don't know, ARC, for example, and it will bring up a definition so you can kind of understand what all these terms and words mean. So go and check this out. It's a free resource. And then you've also got, this is your homepage, and you kind of talk about your story and explore different topics in a kind of blog, right?
Yes.
Amazing. So there's a link down below. Go and check it out, everybody. Valerie, thank you so much for doing this.
Sure.
I've really enjoyed this story, and we have only just scratched the surface. I'd love to have you back again to talk about the next bit.
Fun.
But is there anything else you want to cover before we wrap up?
Oh, there's so much that it'd take 2 more podcasts. So
well, let's do that. Let's turn this into a regular thing, and we can just work our way through your story, and people can go to your blog if they want to read in the meantime about what happened in the raid and your story before the FBI infiltration and obviously afterwards. But Valerie, thank you so much for joining me. And thank you everyone in the chat for all of your questions. Valerie, stay where you are 2 seconds. I'm going to play our outro video, and then we'll finish the stream, and we'll just have a little debrief at the end. All right?
Okay, sounds great.
Thank you so much, everybody, and we'll catch you on the next one.